Every fluid service your Mercedes Benz will need. We are going to talk about fluid services today and which ones you should be doing and when you should be doing them. And one of the reasons that I'm bringing this up is because most people do not seem to address their car's fluid needs. Yeah, it came on for a second. Do it again. Again. No. There.
Take it from the top, please.
Okay, no problem. Every fluid service your classic Mercedes will need. So today we're going to talk about fluid services, and we're going to talk specifically about the more obscure fluid services that never get done or that some shops just do not address. And if there's a filter that goes along with it, we're going to talk about that as well. This is an important video for anybody that wants to use and drive their classic Mercedes and doesn't just want to park it and stare at it. So it's relevant to all of you. The first service that I'm going to start with is the oil service, and that is the oil service, oil filter service, and oil cooler service. So when you perform your oil changes on your classic Mercedes, a great number to focus on is roughly 3,000 miles or annually. So if you cannot get it done within that window, then you need to start being more vigilant about the color and level of your oil after 12 months. Now, some people keep their cars in climate controlled storage, they barely drive them. In 12 months, your oil's not going to go bad, nor is your filter. But if you're using your car more than, say, 1,300 miles a year, and you're doing a lot of cold starts, that's when you have to start paying attention to the quality of your oil. So if your classic Mercedes has an oil cooler that is drainable, that has a little 17 millimeter plug on the bottom, it is also advised to do that repair. But if your classic Mercedes does not have an oil cooler with a drain on it, I wouldn't recommend just taking the lines off willy-nilly. That's not a good idea because you could strip the threads in the oil cooler. So you should really only service an oil cooler that has a drain plug and is designed to be serviced, and you should change the crush washer at the same time. So oil changes 3,000 miles or annually if you're driving your car roughly 1,000 miles a year or more. Now, next service is transmission fluid, and we're going to split this up between automatic and manual transmissions. Every Mercedes automatic transmission that we discuss on these videos would have a filter of some kind. Very early K4A025 boxes, which were the boxes used on the Finn cars and on early 230 SLs, had two different types of filters. One was like a simple screen that bolted up to the inside that you cleaned out. The second one was a full-blown filter. It's always better if you actually change the filter and the pan gasket and not just the fluid. Now, when is it a good idea to service automatic transmissions? I would say that if your car is being stored properly, but you're not driving it much, maybe every 10 years. As far as a mileage number goes, I would shoot for somewhere in between 20 and 25,000 miles. Mercedes liked to say 30,000 miles. That's too much. Too long. And the more powerful and large your engine is and the more complex your transmission, which that would mean something like a 722.3 or 4, because these are the most complicated transmissions we discuss, it is better to do it sooner. On those transmissions, filters can get blocked up and clog and cause odd shifting behavior as early as 10,000 miles. So it is a good idea to look at the transmission service about like you'd look at an extended oil change on a modern car. Doing it at 10,000 miles is not going to hurt you, especially if that's being broken up over several years. The next fluids we're going to discuss are the rear axle oil and the power steering fluid and the manual transmission fluid. Rear axles are very straightforward. If they're not limited slip, it's a great idea to use something like a Valvoline 7590 gear oil synthetic I always like synthetics for this application, and a 30,000 mile interval on that fluid is okay, but sooner is always better. Manual transmissions from Mercedes Benz take automatic transmission fluid. Why? Because of the bearing type Mercedes uses. So don't put anything in there except automatic transmission fluid. Dextron 3, Dextron 2, I don't care. Do it. I would say that on the manual transmissions, it's a good idea to do them at least every 30,000 miles, like no later than every 30,000 miles. But sooner won't hurt them either. Power steering. Power steering fluid is also a 30,000 mile fluid. Most Mercedes most Mercedes power steering systems take Dextron 3 and will work just fine with Dextron 3 ATF. They also have a filter which is located inside the pump. So always change the filter. If you have a separate reservoir, like on a W114 or 115, you will find the filter in that reservoir. What you should not do is run a conventional modern Mercedes or other brand power steering fluid. It'll damage the seals in the steering box. So ATF is the best stuff. You can either use Dextron 2 or Dextron 3. And there's a drain on some of the boxes, but others do not have one. If your box doesn't have a drain, whatever, you'll just have to keep cycling it through. The next fluid we're going to talk about is the coolant. Coolant is a 5-year or 30,000 mile fluid, but you can check the pH of your coolant to see how it is doing. I say this because if you are in an environment where your car has a high thermal workload, or you have you may have some corrosion or scale in your cooling system, it's always a good idea to get your cooling system as clean as possible so you don't induce corrosion into the aluminum cylinder head. Next, we're going to talk about brake fluid. Brake fluid should be flushed every 2 or 3 years. Some people extend it to 4, but with modern brake fluids, really it's 2 or 3 years, especially if you're not using the brakes in your car that much. I've had cars where I put 0 miles in the cars in about a year, and I've still had to go through and change the brake fluid. Brake fluid will survive for longer, but it's not the best thing for the brake calipers. The next fluid we're going to talk about is SLS fluid. This is if your car has rear hydraulic suspension. These systems have a filter, so you should change the filter. And on these systems, 30,000 miles is okay. The best way to change it is to run the engine, undo the return line on the reservoir, and feed the return into a safe fluid container, a relatively large one, and just keep adding fluid in until everything looks nice and clean, and then put it all back together. Don't let it run dry. The last fluid that we are going to talk about specifically applies to the 600, and this is the special comfort hydraulic system oil, and this is not ATF. This is a special formula that it's like similar to Aeroshell 30, but Mercedes really wanted you to use their specialized fluid that they were buying, but it is a type of aviation hydraulic fluid, and it is available outside of Mercedes Benz as Aeroshell. I just can't remember what the viscosity is, but it is a real thing, and you should be doing this every 3 years or so on your 600. I hope you guys liked this video and found it informative. Please like, share, and subscribe, and tap the bell for notifications. And we will talk about some of the other services your Mercedes will need on our next video. Thank you.